Good afternoon. I have such a long story to tell. So I'll just jump from one idea to another. I don't have it chronologically. I have an article about the whole situation in the Netherlands Antilles since the beginning of times up until now. So I just hop through history and tell you some important things that happened in this struggle battle. I don't like the names because it reminds us of things I don't like killing. But sometimes killing is positive because it gets you to, it gets the best energy out of you, the energy to save yourself. So that's why we shouldn't see battle, struggle as something negative. It gets the idea in us to survive, to be different, in order to take out of the stump, think out of the stump and become a language. So that's the most important thing about struggle. In Curacao, actually, in the Netherlands Antilles, because we used to be part of that, many languages were spoken. Spanish was next to us in Venezuela. I myself am a native speaker of Spanish. Dutch was brought to us by the kingdom. Papiamento is our language, and my father is not from Curacao really, but from Aruba, so my ancestors are in Aruba. So we had this mix of languages, and English, naturally. English is the language of the Windward Islands. So in Parliament, it was always like that some people spoke English, some people spoke Papiamento, and in the beginning, we all spoke Dutch. So this mixture of languages was always part of our system. But yet, during all of this language mixture, this multilingualism, Papiamento has always been the language of our people. I don't know how it happened exactly. I think that the Jews spoke Portuguese. And because of that, Papiamento is very near to Spanish and Portuguese. They are white. So it was the sugar that whitened Papiamento, I think. And that's the idea of Frank Martinez also. That's the way we became recognized. It's a strange thing, but white and black becomes better in history. That's what happens, okay, without giving it, without judging, okay? So, but even then, Papiamento was a language that slaves spoke. It was identified with slaves. It was identified with blackness. And Dutch, the language of the colonial power, we were not allowed to speak it. We were not allowed to learn it. And that was our strength because it helped us to develop the language. Okay, because we had to talk in that language. And the Catholic Church was very important at that time in order to, because they taught Papiamento, well, you know about this, religion is very important in our societies. And we can't talk religion in English, Spanish. We talk it in Creole. We talk about, it comes to your soul, so you have to go through the soul, and the soul is Creole. That's what I think in the Caribbean situation. And with us, it was the same. So that is why the Catholic Church, in their school boards, they have most schools in our country. They started teaching religion, but religion became education. Okay, now, what happened from the beginning? We taught in Papiamento, but then the Dutch, they had this war within their own countries, and then the war was between Protestants and Catholics. And at a certain point, you're not supposed to discriminate on religion. And that a law was passed, and then Catholics had to be subsidized too in schools. So it had a repercussion on our islands. Catholic schools, which taught in Papiamento, got subsidy from the government. And then came the thing. It has to be done in Dutch. So with the money came the condition. And Papiamento in education was kind of freezed. But since it had happened, there were advocates from that time on for Papiamento in education. We kept struggling to get our language in education. So it started from the early beginning. So when the Dutch funded schools and the Dutch became the sole language of instruction, we never became best in Dutch. Well, I speak Dutch quite well, but I lived in Holland for about 10 years for my education. I'm a linguist, which makes a difference also. But most of our people, if you're in Curaçao, if you ever have been there, you don't hear Dutch. You hardly see Dutch people. Nowadays, it's becoming different because we're kind of recolonized again. But you don't hear the language. We don't speak it on television, in radios. We have some newspapers in Dutch, but only the Dutch read them. And people like me who are intellectuals, who want to be, who know and they're the intellectual newspapers, you could say. So the people themselves, they don't speak Dutch, they don't think in Dutch, they don't do nothing in Dutch, okay? But in order to get success, in order to become somebody, you have to go through education in Dutch. And that is our problem, because we see Dutch as a language of success, okay? So in order to see Papiamento as a language of success, you have to motivate people, do research, discuss it, and give the people who speak Papiamento a feeling that it is not me that doesn't want you to get through education, because I went through it. So that's a very, very important thing to do. An academic person talking in Papiamento, defending something, but sending their children, his or her children, to a Dutch school. So that is something we have to take into account in all our Creole societies. We have to live the talk. We can't pretend to want mother tongue education in a school system when we ourselves send our children to assist to a school that's completely in King's English or in Dutch in our societies. Next to that, we have the teacher. If you don't educate your teachers, if you don't give clarity, like the lady from Antigua said, and others before her, if you don't give clarity, if they don't know what to teach, how to teach, when to teach, how much to teach, they're not going to be able to do it. And that is an experience we had, because we started with this whole thing very enthusiastically, believing that teachers would be able to do it just because they spoke the language, but it was not to be like that. They need to know the language not only by speaking it, but you have to know language in school is very abstract. It is not the language you speak at home. And you need to have an extensive vocabulary of all the different subjects. And the teacher has to know, not only know it, but it has to be standardized. And one problem we had after 6 years of mother tongue education was the following. We needed to do the test in mathematics in Papiamento. All schools use different words. There was no standard. So how were we going to go about that? So this year, that was the first year, this year we intend to standardize everything and see through the whole thing in order to teach the teachers, to teach the children, to have a standardized system of words in mathematics in order to be able to evaluate mathematics in a standardized way. So you see how far you have to go. It is very, very difficult. Oh, that about the teachers. Parents. Our parents, all parents want the best for their children. And I have, when I was in the whole political field of education and transformation and change, I didn't have children yet. But when I got my own children, I understood the feeling of parents, the fear, the proudness you have when your child gets home with an A. And you want that A to be in the best education possible, which in our case is Dutch. So I felt very, like, what am I going to do with my children? So it has been a very tough thing as a parent to believe in the language and to believe in the fact that although we have these problems, I'm going to send my children to these schools where education itself is not in the highest quality possible because we are developing things, okay? So my oldest went to an all-Dutch school. There was no Papiamento schools at that time. The youngest, she went to a school that started in Papiamento, but when she had to go to the after the kindergarten, she had to go to the primary school. I did not send her to the Papiamento school